Jessica McLaren.
So I graduated high school, and that's a bit weird. My personal experience with high school was definitely not a great one. I do want to preface this video by saying I do suffer from mental health issues that have impacted the way that I dealt with school and the way school affected me and my mental health. And while I don't think I'm the only person ever who's had this type of experience with high school, I do think it is a more unique take on the high school experience that I would like to share, because I feel like the only types of experiences you see on social media are the good ones, and of people talking about how amazing high school was for them and how it was the greatest 4 years of their life. And that wasn't really the case for me. So let's talk about that. So the first thing you need to understand why I struggled quite as badly as I did in high school is that the Canadian school system is a bit different than the American one. Canada is the most educated country in the world, and while that is fun to brag about to my American friends, it also means our standards for education are quite a bit higher. Not to call like Americans stupid or anything, like there are some brilliant people out there. It's just our levels of education are higher than the American levels, if that makes sense. Also, I was only in high school for 3 years because freshman year or just 9th grade isn't a part of our high school years, it's a part of middle school. So I grew up as what teachers liked to refer to as a gifted student. I am one of those burnt out gifted kids. I don't know how much of that was obvious by everything about me. I did really well in school without having to try when I was younger. So I never learned how to study for tests before my 10th grade finals. I had never studied for a test before. And then high school hit and it was terrible because I immediately started doing horribly, and my mental health was greatly impacted by the fact that I was not doing well in school. When I say I was not doing well in school, I just want you to know I do not mean I am one of those kids who was getting 60s and complaining about it. I mean, I got a 17 in my math class. I was pulling pretty much straight 100s in middle school, and then high school hit and I was suddenly failing absolutely everything, and it was really hard. My mental health was also just rapidly declining at this point. I'm not going to talk about that too much because it is a very personal thing, and I don't really want to talk about my mental health too much and have, people infantilize me for the things I went through. So I also will not be naming any disorders I suffer from or anything, just because I don't want people to infantilize me or romanticize my mental illness, because that's just gross. My mental health was really poor at the time, and it was a very vicious cycle of bad mental health leads to not doing well in school because I can't focus on school, leads to my mental health getting worse because I'm doing poorly in school, and that negatively impacts my mental health, leads to doing even worse in school, and it became a very vicious cycle that I could not get out of, and I never did get out of. I am very lucky to have graduated at all. Until about 2 weeks before my graduation date, it was still up in the air on whether or not I actually would graduate. And I don't want people to pity me, because yes, it is my own fault in a lot of aspects that I was kind of just lazy at some points, and the lack of motivation that I had from my mental health issues is not entirely the fault of my mental health issues. Part of it was just me being lazy, but that is not the entirety of what it was. And having it continuously boiled down to that by my parents and by teachers also negatively impacted my mental health and contributed to the cycle. The capitalistic culture that the Western world exists in likes to teach children that if a skill they have cannot make them money, is not a skill worth having and practicing. And that's bullshit. Once you hit high school, everybody expects you to know what you want to do with the rest of your life. You are 15 years old being tasked with deciding the course of literally the rest of your life. And that's fucking terrifying. I have never had a passion before. The only passions I had, growing up were content creation. I've always loved content creation because it's not something I'm good at, and it's not something that I could be seen making money at. It's not a viable option, and I needed to pick something more realistic. And I think it's a very dangerous mentality for educators to consistently be telling the children that they teach that their only valuable skills are the ones that will help them succeed further in life. High school is 3 to 4 years of your life, and that is it. And we, as a society, we live in a society, teach our children that those 3 to 4 years of their life will dictate the outcome of the next 50 of them. And it's really scary to be 15, 16, even 17 or 18 years old and being told that everything you're doing in school is going to affect your future. And it's going to affect your children and your grandchildren, because if you don't pass this test, then you're not going to get into a good university, then you're not going to get a well-paying job, and you're not going to do this and this and this, and then suddenly your great-grandchildren are going to be homeless and it's entirely your fault. That's not how the world works. It took me a while to figure it out for myself. If you are not successful in school, you will be successful in something else. It feels like there is so much pressure surrounding children, literal children, to entirely fix their entire lives within 3 years. Honestly, I'm gonna tell you something. If you are just starting high school and you are watching this video and you are worried about how your future is going to be impacted by the way you do in school, don't be. Seriously, don't be. Jeopardizing your own mental well-being for the sake of making sure you do well in a math class is not a healthy mindset, and it is one we should stop drilling into children. I wish that that's something I had learned when I was a lot younger, because that is something that really could have helped me when I was in high school, is knowing that, just because I don't do well in my high school career doesn't mean I'm fucked for the rest of my life. The mental health of students is also treated as such a back burner problem in comparison to whether or not they're doing well in their classes. And it's gross, honestly. I distinctly remember being in 10th grade and going up to my English teacher and telling her, hey, sorry, I'm gonna be late with this essay. I'll have it in tomorrow instead of today because I tried to kill myself yesterday. And she looked me in the eye and said, you're going to lose marks for that. And that still baffles me because I was 15 years old. As long as a student is doing well in your class, then you care. That's the mentality the teachers seem to have. It is dismissive. The amount of teachers that told me I was just lazy for not having assignments done and for struggling because my mental health was so poor that it was all I could do to get out of bed in the morning, and most days breathing felt like it took too much work, let alone doing the 8 pages of homework they assigned us every day. I think it was every teacher I've ever had. Our capitalistic culture teaches children that their productivity is more important than their well-being. Parents look at kids faking illnesses to get out of going to school and think, oh, kid's just lazy, instead of thinking about the fact that there is clearly an issue here where they are so desperate to not go to school that they're making themselves sick. They're faking illnesses, faking injuries, giving themselves injuries or wishing for injuries so that they do not have to participate in class. Do you know how many times I have been studying for an exam when someone in my class would make that joke where it's like, guys, did you know that if somebody dies during the exam, everybody present passes? Who's gonna take one for the team? What the fuck is that? High school's a weird time. There are a lot of things going on for you in high school. This might have just been my experience, but it feels like in high school, if you are not dating someone, you have no social circle. Friendships do not last in high school. I hate to tell you, but they don't. I entered high school with a very, very solid group of friends who I'd known for all of middle school. I would have given my life for these girls. I still would. They're still lovely people, and I would take a bullet for all of them. And half of them I haven't spoken to in over a year. More than half of them, actually. I came out of high school with one person I can confidently say I will be friends with for 10 years. Maybe 3 people I'd confidently say I'm friends with now. High school is not the be-all end-all of making friends. It's not the be-all end-all of relationships. Your 10th grade boyfriend isn't the man you're gonna marry unless you get really lucky. High school is just a time to figure yourself out. I wish I had known when I was going into high school that it did not matter who my friends were, how I was doing in my classes. It did not matter, because at the end of the day, the only thing that really mattered is that I was making it through a very difficult part of my life, figuring out who I was as a person. And that is a hard thing to do. Do not let anyone else tell you otherwise. Figuring out who you are as a person is hard. I feel like media gives us a very idealized view of the way our high school experience is supposed to happen. And when it doesn't happen according to those stereotypes, those cliches, those expectations, it feels like you're doing something wrong and you're missing out. And that's one of the reasons I think media's kind of shit sometimes. I spent most of my life thinking that pep rallies, homecoming, and prom were things that mass media made up to make high school seem like a more interesting experience, because we didn't have them. We had pep rallies that were just kind of shit, and that's it. And I spent so much of my life thinking that they were fake things that American mass media made up to make high school seem more interesting and to sell movies. And then I befriended some Americans and found out that that's not true, and I was blown away. If you're not having your friends drive you around and singing songs at the top of your lungs in their cars, that's fine, because most people aren't. High school is very mundane. Media makes it seem like it's going to be this big exciting time in your life, but really the day-to-day of high school is so mundane that it kind of hurts. It is the waking up every single day at 7 o'clock in the morning to go to class, 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 go home, do homework. If you have a job, go to work, go to bed, wake up, repeat. That is the cycle of high school. And there are very rarely things that break that cycle. Like, yes, there are the cliche cliques that you see in high school movies. Like, there were popular kids at my school that were throwing parties on the weekends that the entire school was invited to, and it was some big thing that was getting posted everywhere and the police were called. That did happen, but you don't have to go to them to have a high school experience, because I promise you that half the people there don't want to be there either. And I promise you that half the people going to those parties, half the people in these popular cliques are not the people that they're pretending to be, and they are just trying to live the idealized version of a high school experience that mass media has presented to us, because otherwise they feel like they're missing out. Being any form of different is hard. High school is such an important time in your life for discovering who you are as a person, that being any form of different is really hard, because if you're not the same as everybody else, it's really hard to pretend that you know that you're a normal person. Thinking you're a completely abnormal person for whatever reason isn't uncommon. People put on a lot of fronts in high school. I recently learned that one of the boys who bullied me for almost all of middle school is bisexual. I didn't know that. If I had known that in middle school, I think it would have made a lot of a difference, because he was very popular. He had so many friends. And if I had known in middle school that this kid was going through the same struggle I was of trying to figure out who he was as a person and who he was based on his sexuality, I feel like that would have made the whole thing different. Because seeing these people who are the popular kids with tons of friends have similar struggles to you in the face of their identity gives you a sense that you're not completely alone in your struggles. And I feel like that is something a lot of teenagers struggle with, is feeling like their identity is a completely abnormal thing, that they are completely alone. High school was a big chapter of my life. It housed some of the best and worst experiences that I've ever had, especially finishing high school with the coronavirus. It's hard. It feels like you are missing out on something when a pandemic is preventing you from having the experience that everybody else gets to have. Not to rip on the Americans for a second, but America didn't really give a shit about whether or not people were dying during the pandemic, and there were hundreds of schools across the states still having proms, still having full-blown graduation ceremonies, still having all of that. And my school had absolutely nothing. We went into lockdown 3 times. My graduation ceremony was me walking across a stage in the rain in a parking lot. It took 5 minutes. My mom took a lunch break at work to come watch me graduate and then went back to work because it was so insignificant to her day. And seeing all of the other people have completely different experiences from you, knowing that yes, we were doing it to be safe. Yes, our government caring a little bit more about the American government for its people and preventing students from catching the coronavirus because they wanted to have a graduation ceremony and a prom. Well, yes, it is nice to know that we were safe. It feels so alienating and it feels so shit to be one of the only people who's not having that experience. And I know I'm not the only person in the world who's done that, okay? I know last year's graduates got fucked over, this year's graduates got fucked over, next year's graduates will probably be fucked over. I am not the only person in the world who's experienced the struggle of coronavirus prevented me from having a proper ending to my senior year and now I'm sad. Bitch, get over yourself. I'm talking to myself, I'm not talking to you. I need to get over myself. But it also just sucks. And I'm not saying anyone who's been through that doesn't have a right to feel sad about it, doesn't have a right to be mad, because you've had a big part of the coming of age experience that mass American media has perpetrated just taken away from you. And those are the bits of high school that it feels like I have to have those to have had a high school experience, and not having them makes it feel very empty and pointless. If you are entering high school and you are watching this video, I promise you high school is not all bad. It is so much easier to focus on the bad parts of a high school experience, or any experience, than it is to focus on the good parts. But I promise you that the good parts outweigh the bad parts, regardless of who you are. Even I know that. My pessimistic ass knows that the good parts of the experience outweigh the bad parts. You don't need to dread going into high school. You don't need to dread your senior year. And there's no need to push yourself so hard that it makes your mental health decline. If you are not being productive, you are still worth something, and you are still contributing to your own life in a meaningful way by making sure your mental health takes priority. I'm probably forgetting a bunch of stuff that I wanted to say, but this is getting very long and rambly, so I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. I know it's very different from the kind of content that I usually make, but honestly, I just needed to talk about some of this shit, and I need people to understand. Subscribe to make me feel better for how shitty my high school experience was, maybe? Feel free to leave your thoughts on your own high school experience in the comments. I would really like to read how other people feel. If you think I'm just being incredibly overdramatic, go ahead and tell me that too, because I wouldn't blame you for thinking that. Also, sorry that videos have been taking so long to get out. I know I promised in my last one that they wouldn't be impacted by my job anymore, but then I, was graduating. Videos should be more regular now, though, I promise this time. Also, drugs are an issue in high school. I just want you guys to know that. Like, listen to me. If a kid at school tries to sell you really cheap weed, it's not weed, it's oregano. Don't buy it.